Well, hello and welcome to the Wine Access Unfiltered podcast. If you've been listening to this show for a little while now, you've probably heard us give you one fairly consistent piece of advice, which is if you find a bottle of wine that you like and it's not from this country, go ahead and spin it around and take a peek at who the importer is, because these guys are often the key to finding hidden treasures, to discovering wines you never would have found otherwise. But what we haven't talked about in the course of this show is what an importer is and how they operate. How do they find their treasures and diamonds in the rough? And what's it like to travel the world hunting for wines and eating great food along the way? And is it really quite as glamorous as it looks? I don't know. Are there clues to spotting these diamonds and separating from the swill? And if so, can we apply these clues and tricks to our everyday drinking as well? We're here to find out with an importing duo who live in the Napa Valley and know the region and the wine business intimately. They are friends, they are colleagues, they are just wonderful human beings, but they're also wine importers specializing in Italian and French wines. Please welcome to the show, Jonah and Sara Beer of True North Imports. Hi, guys.
Hello. How are you, Amanda?
I am wonderful. I'm so happy to finally have you on the show. And I'm also happy to have another one of your delicious imports as part of the podcast Wine Club. It's so exciting.
We are so excited too. And I think that this particular wine came up because we were talking about beautiful light reds. And so I think Amanda and I were sending messages to each other and I was like, oh my God. Pelaverga, it's the key to everything. So excited! Yes. We're so excited to talk to you about everything importing and about beautiful wines from Piemonte.
Yeah, I think the way that the conversation actually went is I was enjoying pizza and I was singing the praises of Lambrusco with pizza, which I've done often on the show. And Sara immediately slid into my DMs and was like, "But wait, have you tried Pelaverga?" And I was like, "Pella what?"
And it is kind of funny because Pelaverga was new to us when we first had it with Diego Morra and his wife Francesca in the little village of Verduno in Barolo. And it was a revelation. Like, it is one of those wines that, for very good reasons, slips by 99% of the world's radar. But when it hits in a big way because it's the perfect summertime red. I mean, put a pretty hard chill on it. Take it straight out of the refrigerator, and it's like the perfect crushable red that can pair with the widest variety of foods and isn't that expensive.
Love lots of food, but we also don't love spending like a fortune on wines that are super crushable.
That's true. We all don't have 300-year-old house money to like throw around out there.
I'm a renter. Thank you very much.
Listen. Hey, when you're buying a clawfoot tub just as a planter, I feel like, you've reached another stratosphere of
Jonah,
dollars and cents.
I feel like you know me well enough to know that like when there's a bargain to be had, I will find it. So you're referencing, I have this beautiful old vintage clawfoot tub that I like basically salvaged out of this place. I saw it on Instagram and I was like, I have to have it. And I called my dad and I was like, Dad, I know you're 65, but like between like you and like my fiance and my brother-in-law, like we can handle this, right? And he was like, I mean, is it like cast iron? And I was like, it is. And we got it in. But I got that for $100. Nobody believes me. It was $100. So
good, great shopping. Good job. Good job. I felt like it was a lot more than that when you saw it on the Instagram, but okay.
I know, it's beautiful. Well, listen, I love a good value and I love finding good finds, which is really what we're here to talk about today. And I'm revisiting or re-listening to the Kermit Lynch Adventures on the Wine Route book. I'm sure you guys have at least perused it at some point in your lives. And I have to tell you, like going into this episode, I'm ready to join you both as your apprentice, whether you want me or not, like I'm hopping in. But I will say like being a wine importer, at least from his perspective and what I see on Instagram, it seems like such a cool gig. When did you get the itch to start that process?
Well, I think for Jonah and I, we both had been in the wine business a very long time and loved living in the Napa Valley, loved the community here, but both have loved travel for, I think, most of our lives. And for us, we just started to explore other wine regions, which is, I think, a lot of people in the business do. And it's just about seeing all kinds of different cultures and different varietals, where we are in the Napa Valley, obviously Cabernet is king here. And so we just started traveling and falling in love with other places and meeting people that we felt like would be friends for life. And at the time, it didn't feel like, oh, we didn't know we were going to go into business with anyone. But at the time, it just felt like, wow, we want to return here again and again. And then I think we got a little glimmer in our eye maybe about a decade ago.
Yeah, I think it was about exactly a decade ago. And, Sara had been vice president at Duckhorn Wine Company, covering California wholesale sales for 14 years, something like that. I mean, a long time. Wow. And we knew that there was a time when, based on our involvement and partnership in a winery in Oregon called Nicholas J., and we were launching Pilcrow at the same time, we knew that there would come a time when that would need to be sold to restaurants and wine shops around the state of California. And instead of, farming that out to someone that's maybe not going to respect the story as much as we would like, it became kind of like, well, what if we did it on our own? And what if Sara took the lead on building this company? Well, you're not going to just go sell 2 wines. You might as well sell a few other things. Like if you are privileged enough to get an appointment with Amanda McCrossin at Press Steakhouse in St. Helena, you got to come in with multiple things because you got maybe one shot. And all kidding aside, you know how precious a sommelier's time is. So we thought, what if we could sell them things that we also loved and believed in that scratched this itch of getting to drink wines that we adored, fed into the idea of travel and spending more time in Burgundy and in Piedmont, but also became a chance to kind of do something that maybe even had a little bigger reach than we had originally intended. And so it kind of came out of part desperation and part love of the game, like, why not? What else are you going to do?
One thing that I didn't mention is you also have your own wine project in the Napa Valley called Pilcrow, which I have been an enormous fan of. And you also added a little extra project to your Rolodex in the way of wine glasses, which I would be thoroughly remiss not to mention. So we'll do a virtual cheers with our Gabriel glass, my favorite little black dress of wine glasses. This is the universal wine glass that you guys always see me use across all of our videos on the podcast, as well as my own personal Instagram. I'm a huge fan, and you guys have been stewarding that for a few years now, right?
Yeah, it's been 2.5 years since we acquired Gabriel Glass North America. So we're the owners of the import and distribution company, which is exclusive to Canada, USA, and Mexico. And it's allowed us to become great friends and partners with Rene Gabriel and his family, who's the creator of the glass, and his CEO, Tobias, and just kind of seeing that the thing that we love, I mean, shoot, we're sitting in front of like a board about letterpress, like we love anything that's handcrafted, that's like truly artisanally made. We know that the Luddites were correct. And so we're proud Luddites. I'm not afraid of your iPhone. It doesn't make us that like, that we're spooked by technology, but we love things that are handcrafted and handmade. Sure. And being able to be a part of this wine glass company where, like, every single one of them is an act of artisanship. How do you say that? What would that be? Artisanal craftsmanship. Let's go with that.
More syllables.
More syllables. And I think that it just became this great chance. And it's also very like sashimi sushi. It's simple. It's a universal glass that's truly designed to cover bubbles to Barolo. And you just kind of, it calls a little bit of bullshit on the idea that you need 35 different glasses just for Chardonnay, okay, like there's a little bit, that's a lot. So we're really thrilled with it. It's been a great addition to what we get the chance to do.
Yeah, I'm a fan. And I love that you guys are sort of cross-pollinating across the many different segments of our delicious industry. Speaking of which, we've got to cross-pollinate into what's going on in the wine world. All right, you guys, if there's one thing that we love to talk about on this podcast and our culture events, it is wine sales, or specifically winery sales and wine heists. Maybe it's like the old school Ocean's 11 Thomas Crown Affair lover in me. But we'll start with a rather big wine sale. Some of you probably have heard of a winery that I'm a big fan of. I know Jonah and Sara, you guys are fans as well. Kelly Fleming, one of my favorite boutique wineries up in Calistoga, has sold to Jason Woodbridge of 100 Acre for an undisclosed amount It is a 286-acre estate with 12 acres of vine. It included a 5,000 square foot winery with aging caves and a separate residence. Kelly Fleming will retain her brand. She'll sell through the rest of her inventory. But I think what was interesting is they sort of sold and bought for the same reasons, weirdly. Kelly is sort of citing the issues in Napa Valley around how difficult it is to do what you want to do in Napa County these days. And Jason kind of going through a lawsuit himself and having some issues with Napa County. He's been buying up a lot of real estate. He purchased Madrigal not too long ago. Kelly was even quoted as saying, after 26 years, I frankly was worn down by struggling with Napa County and its regulations, seeing the very long-term impact of the glass fire on the property, and also, in general terms, the climate in the valley with no support for small family wineries. It's an interesting sale. They were neighbors. She really wanted someone who was going to keep the property intact. And so she found a buyer in Jason Woodbridge, who I know, I'm sure you guys have at least interacted with. Well, what do you guys think? I know you have some personal connection to this property, and I'm curious, what are some of the vibes in the valley right now?
I met Kelly when she was married to Paul back when I was working at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars 22 or 23 years ago, maybe 23 years ago. We watched Kelly go through a lot of her process of building that winery and building that residence, which is a stunner. I mean, it's a stunner. And we just, we wish her the best. I know it was a dream that she had. She got to live it. She did the things she wanted to do. I think Rebecca George made amazing wines there. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that, when you talk about the choices you can make when you're ready to move on to your next chapter, I mean, it sounds like it's one of the best options that you could be presented with, which is that the properties are contiguous. They have a lot of symbiosis in terms of the different people that have been involved with their wineries for their history, and that there's a plan to make a vineyard designate Cabernet from the property moving forward. I mean, there's just so many other versions where there's lots of big companies involved, and it's a different vision, or it's a breaking up of things. And this sounds like it's actually an opportunity to preserve the legacy of that particular corner of the Napa Valley.
And hopefully she found someone that'll respect the legacy of what she did up there. It's a beautiful spot, great part of the valley that most people don't get to.
Yeah, may we all be so lucky to follow our dream and see it through, and then have a happy ending with their families. I mean, and to see your baby, and say what you want about Jason Woodbridge, the guy clearly loves growing grapes and making wine. He's passionate about it, and there's no question about that. So I think the fact that the winery and the estate really live in hands that will take great care of it is something that I hope gives her solace in knowing that she accomplished something incredible. And it's been a favorite of mine for a long time, and it will not change. The only thing that will change is I guess it has to be removed as a recommended winery on my website now, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Well, we'll move on to Wine Heist. Do you guys ever follow what's going on in the wine world with some of these crazy wine? There was one near the Eiffel Tower. There's been crazy wine thefts. This one is a little bit unique. I don't know if you saw these headlines. I saw one in Decanter and one in Wine Spectator. That it was the same story, it's a slightly different version. But the gist is, last year, a prominent winery in Burgundy, who we all know, began to notice that some wines were disappearing randomly and slowly from their wine cellar. And so they installed some hidden cameras to figure out what the heck was going on. And they discovered that this maintenance worker, who's 57 years old, had been pocketing wines for a period of 7 years across 2 different wineries. But here's the kicker. Unlike a lot of the wine heists that we've talked about, this guy had no intention of selling these wines or even drinking these wines. He is a married father of 3 who, is described as a hoarder and diagnosed kleptomaniac. He, like I said, didn't drink anything. In fact, he would go on these hunting expeditions with his friends and buy separate wines to enjoy with them. He really just did it because he just liked the idea of looking at these wines, not only in his own cellar, but in his mother's cellar. There were 8,000 bottles that they discovered. This is not a small amount of wine. He did not steal 8,000 from this particular place. I think it was somewhere in the vicinity of like just over 1,000, but it was an estimated value of over $500,000 that he stole across Albert Bichot and Joseph Drouin across a 7-year period, which is absolutely wild.
Wow. I did not hear about this. And I feel like I wish I knew his mother before they discovered the wine. I could help drink some of these things. That's unreal.
No, I had heard a little bit about it, just that, I mean, it's very interesting for someone. I guess it sounds like he was very much in love with and in awe of these great Burgundy houses, as well as these very special vineyards. And it's interesting. I think probably the three of us can't relate to the idea of sitting around all these bottles and never opening any
and not pulling a cork.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm not surprised it takes a while to figure out when you have that much wine that you're counting all the time. Mm-hmm. It is possible for someone to.
Well, and I think that, as you know, Amanda, and maybe most of your listeners know, if you visit cellars in Burgundy, the bottles are unlabeled and just kind of stacked as bottles. So, and some that don't get counted, I'm sure, ever, and especially with two extraordinary domains that have great history like that, you could sneak the bottle out for a long time before someone's going to catch on. And here's a good tip for anyone that's going to Burgundy. In Beaune, Joseph Drouin has a wine shop that you can go and buy wine and taste a few things. But if you sign up ahead of time, they do a historical tour of the old cellars that run underneath the city of Beaune. And in fact, they have caves that touch up against the original Roman walls that were built around the city of Beaune. They have the oldest lever press that's known to exist in the region. It's one of the most fascinating tours that you can possibly take. And of course, ends with a great tasting of fantastic wines in the cellars of Domaine Drouin. So, and it's in right downtown Beaune. So it's easy to get to. It's easy to make that reservation online. And it's one of my favorite tours to recommend to people that are heading to Burgundy.
Only Jonah Beer would have like the hot tip for finding underground cellars off of a wine heist conversation. Be like, you know where you should go. Just like, don't steal the wine. Just like go for the tour.
What if you do? Drink it. No, I'm kidding. Kids, don't steal the wine. But if you do, drink it.
Don't leave the evidence. Or at least like slap a fake label on or something. Yeah, that was actually one of the giveaways. Was they noticed all of these unlabeled bottles and they were like, well,
Yeah.
Poor guy. But he got a 1-year prison sentence and a fine. And I think Albert Bichot, he asked him for like a €1 penance, just as a symbolic thing. But it just sounds like this guy just, maybe had some mental health issues and, but really loved just looking at the wines and like sitting there like it was a library, which I don't know. I'm like, I would definitely want to pull a cork or two, but I also kind of understand, where he was coming from. But I would personally buy the bottles myself.
I don't understand at all where he was coming from. If you're going to steal the shit, pull the cork. Come on, let's be real.
That's fair.
Staring, looking at bottles. You can look at empty bottles. Go get empty bottles. That's fine. Speaking of pulling the cork and drinking wine, I'm going to get started.
Yeah, no, I've already been drinking. We should mention that, as I sort of already alluded to, this is the Diego Morra Pelaverga. This is part of the Wine Access Unfiltered Wine Club podcast shipment. If you are drinking with us and part of that wine club, you should go ahead and grab that wine now if you haven't done so already. If you have an all-purpose Gabriel glass, go ahead and put it in there. And if you don't, well, put it in whatever you got. But the most important thing is make sure you have a chill on it. So this wine is best served a little on the colder side, 20 minutes in the fridge-ish. Should kind of get the job done, but I would recommend like a full hour to get it nice and cold. And if you are not a member of the Wine Access Unfiltered Podcast Wine Club, the longest name for a podcast wine club in wine club history, truly, this is your moment. This is your chance to shine. We'd love for you to join us. All of the information is below. It's $120 plus tax, but including shipping. And as always, you're going to get 10% off of your Wine Access purchases online. So like I always mention, there's some sort of girl math in there that makes this basically free. You can find all of that information along with where you can leave us a review and subscribe to this podcast. The reviews are super, super helpful. We are immensely grateful to those of you who leave us the 5-star ones. And if you have any feedback, just leave them for the DMs. That's where we like the feedback. So anything less than a 5 can go there. All right. That's my spiel for now. We will see you guys all back here in just a second. All right, you guys, you should have the Diego Morra Pelaverga in your wine glass right now. And normally I'm the one who gets to spiel the wine, but since we've got Sara and Jonah who scouted this bad boy, I feel like I should let you, Sara, like take the wheel on this.
This is a wine that we just feel so passionate about. Piemonte is such an interesting region in Italy. And Jonah and I, when we first fell in love with it, we fell in love with Nebbiolo and we fell in love with Barolo, Barbaresco, Roero. So we really, I think, first started from the place of Nebbiolo, but then we started to discover all of these other grapes. And Pelaverga is one of the rarest grapes from Piemonte. It's actually only planted really in the town of Verduno, which is one of the 11 Barolo villages. And Diego Morra is one of the producers. They've been farming for many generations, and Diego is the newest generation of producers. And they are so his family has had vineyards for many decades, generations. But he decided to go to enological school and start the winery. And they're right in the village of Verduno. And a lot of what they have planted is Nebbiolo. They have planted Barbera, Dolcetto, a lot of the other red grapes. They also have Chardonnay planted, which we can talk about as well.
Unbelievable.
Yes, which Longue Chardonnay is a very, very interesting wine from them, and also as a category. And Pelaverga is a historic grape that has always been planted for, I think, the first sort of official plantings of it intentionally, not as a blending grape, but as a specific grape that was planted in a vineyard to make just a Pelaverga was in the 1970s. And I think it was actually recognized in the 1990s as its own DOC. But we're just absolutely in love with this wine. I think anybody that knows me, I'll just speak for myself. Jonah, you can speak for yourself. Oh, nice. I love light red wines. I love crushable reds. I love anything. I mean, we obviously work a lot with Barolo, which is Nebbiolo is a very strong, has a lot of tannin to it. And then you've got Cabernet Sauvignon, which we make in the Napa Valley, which has a lot of structure to it. And then you've got wonderful, beautiful wines like this Pelaverga, which is a historic grape, very, very small. Anybody that is getting this in the club is really getting one of the rarest wines in the world. Mm-hmm. And once you have a bottle, I don't think you can stop. So you're going to fall in love with this. And then everybody's going to slide into Amanda's DM saying, how do I get more?
One, Diego Morra and his family go back to the founding of the village of Verduno, right? So this is one of the most historic and relevant families in the region. Of course, known for mostly the Barolo Monbelliero, which is the Grand Cru, it's the Richebourg of this portion of Barolo. But this little Pelaverga, which again, his father and grandfather had planted, like the original plots of Pelaverga that everything's kind of grown from, stem out of Diego Morra. And there are how many producers?
I think they say there are 18 wineries that make Pelaverga. I think there are some people that purchase grapes as well, but 18 is kind of the
So 18
standard.
And maybe only 5 imported into the U.S.?
Yeah.
And we have the exclusive on this one, and it sells out quickly. It is a very popular wine. And by the way, I think any red is crushable if you put your mind to it. All right? Like, you just gotta...
Jonah's not a quitter.
Aromas and flavors. What are you picking up when you go through this wine?
Yeah, so this wine is always, and there are different styles of Pelaverga. I would say that all of them, though, highlight this sort of really pretty red fruit, some florality. It has a beautiful texture. There is some tannin in this wine in the mid palate, but it also is like light and bright and has juicy fruit to it as well. Mm-hmm. And then the defining characteristic aromatically for Pelaverga is always pepper. And we think of it as white pepper. I've had people say pink pepper and black pepper as well, but it has this pepperiness to it that I think is kind of unique to it.
Yeah, it kind of has like a little bit of like a Nebbiolo nose with a like dolcetto body, right? It's kind of like deceivingly like floral and almost feels a little serious in the nose, but then you taste it and you're like, oh, like there's like a breath of fresh air in there. Like it feels just like it wants to grow wings and fly away and just like, you know, have a spring day with.
Yeah, I think that's really an interesting part of like why the chill works on it so well. It's because the acid's nice and bright and it freshens it. And there's a character that I love about, I mean, really Nebbiolo, so Burgundies, Barolos, even old style Napa Cabs, is when the fruit is a crunchy fruit, right? This isn't like an extracted, dried fruit, anything that's desiccated. It is a crunchy red fruit And it feels like strawberry with maybe like strawberry rhubarb almost, because there's like a fruit herb complex to it that I think is just adorable. And that little pepperiness is just classic.
Yeah. Which you find, I feel like you find that a lot with Italian wines, though, that like fruity, herby thing. Like to me, that's the signature of like Northern Italian wines are just, they always have a little fruit, a little herbaceousness.
True. And I think that you see that obviously in old school Napa Cab too. Like it's like the perfect Cabernet Sauvignon is almost the perfect fruit herb complex. And sometimes I think Nebbiolo gets into that tar and roses kind of version of it. But this is just almost like that, like there's something fresh and green in the positive, all the positive nuances of like the herb quality to it, which I think is great.
Yeah. And presumably you really don't see this outside of this place, right? Like this is my first time exploring Pelaverga in general, but I've never seen it elsewhere.
It is only planted in this one village, a little bit around in the surrounding villages on the boundaries. But I mean, you're talking about tiny, tiny amounts. And this is a grape that normally, if you have a vineyard where you're planting Nebbiolo on the south-facing side, you can plant Pelaverga also on the north-facing side. So a lot of times it is just sort of a continuation of other grapes that that work in different exposures. So yeah, it's just always worked in this one village. In many ways, I'm surprised more people aren't exploring it, but it just always does really well in these soils in this one village.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the Italians, they don't like to explore things. They're like, well, if it's not been done for 800 years, like we're done exploring.
I want to talk a little bit about being a wine importer. Let's start at the beginning. If you don't know anything about the world of wine or the world of alcohol in the United States, the way that it works is if you want to drink a wine from Burgundy, somebody's got to find it. They've got to import it in. And then if you're not in the state of California, the importer has to sell it to a distributor, and then the distributor has to sell it to a retailer. And then you can then buy the wine from the retailer. Now, there's some instances in which that can be like, shifted, and there's some ways that we can remove the middleman here and there. But by and large, that's how the system's working. So just to clarify, I mean, most people, unless they're in the state of California, cannot buy directly from you guys, True North Wine Merchant, right?
That's correct. And we don't sell even in California direct to consumer as an importer. I mean, it's hard enough doing. First of all, this is why they should just sign up for Wine Access, Unfiltered. Wine
See, we do all this for you.
Whatever it is. Because
thank you, Jonah.
Even just you describing it's exhausting. And yes, it is exactly how it goes. So yes, like Kermit Lynch has set up a shop in Berkeley and you can go and buy directly from him. That's not the avenue that we're in. So.
And it's not the avenue that most importers are in, to be clear.
Almost none. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's a handful of small people trying to do that now because they see the extra margin in that, but it can be a pretty limited approach. And I think the other side is that when you go through all that hassle, right, and you've found someone whose product you want to buy, who you like, who gives you a good price, whose packaging is good, and the price to quality ratios high, and then you buy it from them in their town. Like you've got to go pick it up. Like they don't ship anything to you. You've got to go get it. So now you're over there getting your truck and you've got that. You go through all this stuff. You do it in part because you love them and you love their product. And they count on you. I mean, they rely on us to help build their brand and tell their story in a way that far exceeds the contribution that we'll get out of it. If we do our jobs correctly, Diego Morra over time will have a household name like a Joseph Drouin or a Bartolo Mascarello or Fratelli Alessandria. Like there are names that were built because they had a great importer that got them in front of restaurants and in wine shops and in great clubs and told their story. And you do that because you find yourself having a kinship, a friendship. You dine with them in their homes and you meet the kids and you see this family that, they struggle with all the things that we do in Napa. They have a lot of the same and sometimes more difficult issues to overcome. So we find it to be as important that we get their wines out there broadly into a big marketplace for people to see and learn about, as opposed to a single solitary wine shop in San Diego, where that might be extra margin, and it certainly isn't a wrong way to go. But if you don't visit that shop, you'll never know about that product.
Wine Access is an incredible partner, I think, for an importer like us, because you're able to share this story with so many people, both through the podcast and the wine club, that would never otherwise be able to taste this wine and explore this new grape. And that's kind of the exciting part for us, is that we really want to bring these stories and these wines from far, far away for people to really fall in love with.
So how do you find these wines from far, far away? I mean, it seems like most importers are specializing in a region, but there's a lot to choose from. I mean, a lot of us have been to like wine regions, and there's only so many wineries you can go to in a day. Like, how do you figure out where you're going? And then, what do you do from there?
I think at the beginning for us, some of it was that we already had some friends, some wineries that were kind of on our mind where the timing was right. That they hadn't been in the market, or they had been in the market and exited and were looking for new importers. So there were some things that came across as great timing. We were starting at the right time.
You knew them how? From like just tasting at restaurants in the regions, or people had recommended them to you?
Basically a combination of us visiting them already because someone had recommended them. And so it was just good timing that they were ready to start importing into California. Or also people were over time kind of vouching for us. We had someone who was a good professional colleague of theirs, maybe a writer or someone who is an expert in that region would kind of put in a good word for us.
Amanda said, a lot of importers specialize in a region.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times that's Italy. We're focused on just Piemonte. So
okay.
A lot of times they go, we import wines from France. We're just doing Burgundy. So we're hyper focused, hyper like detailed and in the weeds. And we still feel like there's so much more to explore just in these two spots. So, started by, I think if you're going to go out in the world, you have to narrow the world down. We've been approached, and I think we probably each get 10 to 12 emails a day.
Yep.
From someone in Chile, Argentina, Australia, Austria, France, Italy that are like, we're looking for an importer. Can you,
wow.
we want to be in California. What can we do? And sometimes they'll be from Burgundy and Barolo. And then you go to the next level of like, okay, well, you're inside this super small target that we already have. And first thing I do is find a picture of their bottle online, because that tells you a lot right away. Like, because as terrible as it is, if it looks awful, like it's going to be a hard sell. Like you have to care about how your bottle looks. You have to care about how that plate of food looks when it comes out, right?
Sure.
Like appearance matters.
Is it Insta-worthy? Yeah.
We don't let it stop at that, but that's an important first piece of information to be like, okay, who's really calling? And then the second one is we got to get a look at their price. This is before we taste anything. And we've got to know, is it going to be valuable? Is there going to be a fairness to it in the marketplace? And then the third thing is taste it. And if you've gotten to those three, then it's go meet the people. So it's kind of like that's the fourth and I think very critical one, because we did have one where we loved the way it looked. We loved the way the price was. The taste was okay. And then we met the people and it was like, this isn't going to be a good fit for us, Okay. And so the vetting process is a lot.
Yep.
So that's interesting. I didn't realize that you had the ability to taste the wines before you met the producers. My understanding, or at least in my mind, it was like, no, you like go out and you like traverse the region and just like knock on people's doors, which I assume to some degree is like kind of how a baby still happens. But once you get there, outside of like the people, are there red flags? Are there green flags? Like what's a yes, what's a no? How would someone know just by like talking or interacting or looking at the place, like, yes, this is good, or no, this is probably not the vibe?
Let's just say in regions like Bordeaux or Burgundy, Piedmont, Tuscany, knocking on doors and being like, hey, I want to be your importer, that's not going to work. Like that's,
okay.
A, they're not going to answer. And B, if they do answer, this isn't the approach. That's the kind of like dream version, the Hollywood version of it.
Yes.
Remember, this is often people that need to have a comfort level. They need to know who you are, where are you coming from, why are you here? In certain regions, right, where they're just like, it's lesser known and there's not a guaranteed sale for your wines, which pretty much they are in these regions for Burgundy and Barolo. You've got to kind of get someone to vouch for you. You've got to find your way in. And in northern Italy, for us, that happened through a friend named David Barry Green, whose family has Barry Brothers and Rudd in London, which is a great wine shop, which I had sold wine to for a long time. He had moved to Piedmont. He is, in my opinion, now, if not the, and it's a very soft if not the most plugged in, connected, and most erudite individual on wines from that region and the vineyards and soils. He blows. I mean, he moved there from England without speaking Italian, learned Italian. He would walk every village, from village to village, through vineyards. Like, his mastery of the area is unparalleled in my estimation. And to have a native guy like that vouched for us with a few, and once you've gotten in and you can show, hey, I do your neighbor's wine and here's what we do and how we do it, and you can call them and ask for a reference. That's kind of like, that's more of the way in than just like, hello, is Giuseppe home? I'd like to speak to him about his wine. Like,
in my mind, that's how it went.
No, and you're not wrong. It's because we've been led to believe that that's how it would be, right? You know, any wine movie you've ever seen, that's kind of how it goes. Like, I don't know if you've seen the show Drops of God, but like, that's how it goes in Drops of God, and that's just not the norm. That's
not the way. So red flags, green flags. Once you get there, you've already tasted the wine, you've been vetted. Are there things in the winery that you're looking to see? Are there things in the vineyard you're looking to see? Or is it really just, this idea of a very focused story, a direction, a purpose, an ethos?
Yeah, I mean, I think that many of our producers are working with their own vineyards. And so that's definitely, we're not working with anybody that's like a negociant that's bringing in grapes from various different places and not connected to the place. And most of our producers are also really specific to that village. So they've, multi-generational, family owned. They're not kind of trying to be a jack of all trades. They're trying to really focus on kind of the history and legacy of where they are based. So I think that's true. And I think being great farmers, a lot of our producers are certified organic and or biodynamic. So we're looking for a real attention to detail in terms of farming. And then, of course, are they great people to spend time with? And so, I mean, at the beginning, particularly in Burgundy, it's a little bit more formal, like you're really getting to know each other. Italy is a little more relaxed. I don't want to be too generalized, but, in Burgundy, you're having very formal meetings and not getting too far ahead of yourself. And it takes time to sort of be invited into people's homes and, getting to know them, their families better, kids and everything. But we've been doing this now for a decade. So there's this time where you kind of get to the point where there's actually a next generation you're starting to see. And that's really important for a lot of the families in Europe, because a lot of wineries are staying family owned. So it's really exciting. And I would say that's been one of the most satisfying things for us along the way, is actually getting to know everybody. Yeah. And so at the beginning, I do think that it's really just like, do you actually have a sense of where you want to go together and you get along? Yeah.
But yes. And I think that's the green flag, red flag thing. To me, there's two standout ones in Piedmont, especially. As you know, as Sara mentioned, we've been growing grapes and making wine here in Napa. Now this is our 11th year. Before that, I was with Frog Sleep for a long time. So spotting a well-farmed vineyard's pretty much ingrained in my blood, like it's not everyone's got to go to the extreme that we do with Pilcrow with dry farm, no till, no hedge. Like, we take it all the way. Yeah. But if we're approaching the cantina and past your vineyard and there's clear signs of Roundup, then red flag, just hard red flag, green flag would be if we're seeing the orange and yellow poppies, and clearly you're into a no-till situation and you're not using any sort of glyphosate, big green flag. If we get in the cellar and we see small French oak barriques that are brand new, so small French oak barrels that would store Bordeaux or Burgundy, and they're brand new, red flag. If we see large, huge Slovenian oak casks that are the size of a VW bus, green flag.
Okay, so explain why that is, because I think a lot of people listening would be like, why wouldn't you want the brand new, beautiful Maserati oak? Why would you want these old big honkers?
It's an important distinction for Piemonte because Barolo and Barbaresco are traditionally stored only in the large Slovenian casks. So really big, large casks that impart very little oak flavor. And it's the traditional historic way that they've been made. Over our lives, we've discovered that those are the wines we enjoy the most and the stories that we think are the most compelling. So versus the small French oak barrels, which were only introduced in the 90s to Piemonte, 1990s, not 1890s, but 1990s, do we see the influence of that? And it changed the style of those wines. Barbarescos and Barolos aged in small new French oak taste less like Nebbiolo in the region and more like a winemaking style. So that's a generalization, and certainly there are exceptions. So before I start getting pinged left and right with everyone that's got their exception to that rule, yeah, there's shit wines made in cask and there are good wines made in small barrique. But it's a flag. It's something you don't want to drive right past without taking note of it and then trying to investigate further. Like, and this happened to us once where I was a little bit like, oof, that's a lot of new oak I'm looking at. And when over the tasting, I was able to press the owner and he's like, oh, that's actually, I'm storing that for a neighbor. And I was like, okay, shwoo. Oh. Like, so sometimes you don't let it determine things for you, but you should take it as a data point, like everything. Like, hey, this is something we should take into consideration if we're getting married, to this new winery that we're going to import and have a very deep relationship, hopefully for a long, long time.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point because this is a data point, or these are data points for you guys, True North. This is not data points, red flag, green flags for every importer. And this is also why paying attention to your importers is so important, because not only are you buying from the people who are vetting the people, you're also vetting how they're making these wines. And because you have this set of data points that you're looking for across the board of producers, as a consumer, you can kind of always assume that if you're buying a wine from True North, you're probably going to get something more classically styled. You're probably going to get something that is farmed without any of the things you just mentioned. So, this is, I think, part and parcel for why we're doing this episode, is to explain that it goes beyond just a couple of people finding some good wines and bringing them back to the US for us. Like, there's an approach, there's a philosophy to this. It's not just, what can we do to make money? There's something much more deep here. And it's really fascinating to kind of learn the history of how you guys came about, what that ethos was for you. How did you find Diego Morra?
Diego was a product of my insomnia and
was it insomnia or did you have too much to drink?
Yeah, as well. The hard part is if the bottle's really good, I'll stay up later just to finish it. So, on one of our many trips to Piedmont early on, we were having a discussion with someone about this particular bottle shape and the historic influence it has on the region. But also, Amanda, these little words emblazoned in the glass that say Albesa, Albesa, Albesa. That little stamp is not the producer of the wine. It's the producer of the bottle, the glass itself, the empty bottle. You'll notice it's the same on a bottle of Bartolo Mascarello. It's the same on a bottle of Crescente Alessandria. It's the same on a bottle of Manuel Marinacci Barbaresco. It is a symbol of the style and shape of bottle and the oldest bottle producer in the region that's only for Barolo and Barbaresco and wines from that part of the Langhe, right? So not even Roero, not even across the river. It's just for the Langhe, and it has to be a traditional producer. In other words, you have to apply. If you start you decide that it's time to cash in on the Amanda McCrossan $1 billion, industry, the goop of wine that you've created, and you say, I want to go start my own winery in Piemonte. I'm going to make Barbaresco. And let's say you're 10 years into it and you've made great wines. You can then apply to the Albesa Corporation to buy their bottles, their empty glass. And you have to make the application. You have to be a traditionalist in how you approach the wine. They taste the wine to make sure. You can't use roto fermenters. You can't do things like small French oak barrique. You've got to be a traditionalist. Traditionalists are also attracted to making sure that their wines are put into Albesa glass.
Yeah.
So I discovered this with Sara, and I got so fascinated by this that one night, polishing off a bottle of Barbaresco, I found a link buried deep in the terms and conditions portion of the Albesa Glass website that I could download a list of everyone that's authorized to use Albesa Glass.
No way.
So I downloaded this list, and it was long. And then I did the painstaking process of now cross-checking everyone on the list to see, did they have a COLA registry? Was there someone already importing it that I could find? COLA being the Certificate of Label Authorization, which is the government's website that tracks who's doing what with wine labels that we have to apply everyone to. I then cross-checked Google search, Wine Searcher Pro, and then a European website where I could try to find information about the winery, because most didn't have their own website.
Right.
And I scoured it. And out of it, we found 3 potential candidates, 3 out of hundreds that were not imported, seemed to have a very good reputation, and seemed to have very good packaging. And so then we went back to Italy. We had contacted all 3 ahead of time. At this point, we were importers, so we had credibility. We had people that they could reference check us against. And we went to visit. And out of those 3, the first 2 were duds. One was not a dud. He's just too young. He was just starting. Like, we went to his grandmother's house where he was installing his first tank to put in his grandmother's shed, she cooked us lunch, and he was so nervous. As we approached the house, he was pacing back and forth, and his grandmother kept coming out to try to give us more food, and he'd be like, "Ma, Grandma, it's too much. It's too much." And so it was the greatest time. It's just too early. One was a dud. He was too early. And then one was Diego Morra. And we got there, and it was, we were instantly smitten. I was like, oh, this is going to be so great.
Yeah. And I just want to be clear. Diego and Francesca are a charming couple, and they have the most beautiful winery dog named Uvetta, which means little grape.
Little raisin.
Little raisin?
Yeah, same thing. Yeah.
And so Uvetta comes running out to greet us before anybody else does. And it's hard not to fall in love first.
So we sit down, and Amanda, this might come as a shock to you, but sometimes I can be what's often described as a pompous ass. And so certainly, we sit down, and I was like, let's get to your Monviliero Barolo, fast forward to the good bits. And the first wine they poured us was their Langhe Chardonnay. And, having worked with John so intimately and closely on the Frog Leap Chardonnay, which I was so proud of, and it was reductive and stony and minerally, I was like, are you kidding me? All right, let's quickly drink your Langhe Chardonnay and move on.
Yeah. And
we both just, the same thing. We sat back in our chairs, and I just kind of rubbed my temples, and I looked at Sara, and she's like, don't say it yet, but we're going to import, because I want to go right to the yes, And so.
Yeah. Make them work for it a little bit. Play hard to get.
I know. I'm not good at that at all. I'm wine importer a slut 101. It's we tasted the Chardonnay, we had the Pelaverga. I was so hooked. And then we got into the Barolos, which are transcendent. And the best part was they were meeting with 2 of the biggest importers in the US later that week. And we just happened to find them on the Albesa site. We just happened to get there 2 days before the other guys. And they did their other meetings. And at the end of the week, Francesca sent Sara and I an email, and she said, the other guys were great and they're very big, but you 2 are grape growers. You 2 are winemakers, and you grow your own grapes. So you understand what we're doing more than any of them. So we want to go with you guys. Mm-hmm. So almost in an unbelievable turn of events, we found them because of the Albesa glass and a search for a traditionalist producer.
This is your movie, guys. I mean, let's write the book. Let's get it made. Who do we know at Netflix besides Dylan Proctor? to like get this done.
One guy at Netflix.
That's amazing. I love stories like that. I think it speaks to just the serendipity that is this world, but also just the passion that you guys clearly have for not only this project, but I mean, everything that you're doing. The wine is delicious. I actually can't believe this is the only one of Diego Morra I've tried. So we'll have to rectify that in the future for sure. Cause it sounds like the Langage Chardonnays are where it's at. And you know, I'm a huge fan of that Frog Sleep Chardonnay. So
I know you are, and you were early adopter for us when we made that change in style and helped us to push it through. And for that, we're always grateful.
We love Chardonnay in the show. I love Chardonnay. And so if you're a member of the wine club, you probably are lovers of Chardonnay along with me. In fact, we had friends of yours. We had Keith and Holly's Chardonnay from At Large in Oregon as part of the wine club.
Good.
Love it.
Yeah.
Those guys are so sweet. And I think that Keith Emerson is undeniably the unsung hero winemaker of this valley. Like,
oh, I think that's true too. Yeah.
We know a lot of the big names that consult for other people, and Keith just kind of does his thing kind of quietly. He helps. He works with a lot of wines. Like, he consults for a lot of people, and he's just so focused and smart and organized and talented. And yet, just like when it's done, he's like, okay, I'm going to go for a run. Like, I'm done. Like, I don't need the rest of it. And so when they came out with At Large, it was the Sauvignon Blanc was the first wine we had, and it's delicious. The Chardonnay was a stunner. Like, it's still, it outkicks its coverage. It's the perfect wine for the Wine Access Unfiltered Wine Podcast.com wine club.
You're crushing it. Yeah.
It's perfect.
No, it's delicious. I've talked about it a number of times. It's actually a very well priced Chardonnay for what it is too. But anyway, the Pelaverga, which is what we're drinking on this episode, is delicious. And if you were to have it alongside the At Large, which was I think it was in shipment from last year. I think it's back on the Wine Access website. You can always buy that at 10% off if you're a member of the wine club. There we go. We took a first full circle.
Free wine.
Okay, you guys, you have lots of hunting to get to, but before we get there, we have some plugs to do because you have a lot of things going on in your lives. So what would you like the people to know? How can they find you? What should they buy?
Like, there's two things that we're proud of all of them, but I think there's two of them that like are really top of the list because they incorporate all of that. And I think Pilcrow's number one. It's the wine that we, kind of believed needed to be made back in 2014 when we first launched Pilcrow. And it's the wine that I think has an important story to tell right now. And as you know, it's our love letter to Napa Valley from the 50s, right? Like, yeah. I think any great wine, just like this Pelaverga, when you open a bottle and you have that first sip, it takes you to that place. Yeah. It transports you to that area. Mm-hmm. With Pilcrow, we're trying to do two things. We're going to transport you to the Napa Valley, but also you're going to get in the DeLorean with Doc Brown and you're going back to 1955, right? We're taking you to not just a place, but a time in that place. And for us, those wines are marked by the great wines of Nathan Fay and Lee Stewart and Bob Travers and Bob Sessions and the guys from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s that were making wines of savoriness, high acid, lower alcohol, very little oak influence, and a tremendous respect for this idea of nature's perfection instead of man's perfection. And what started with this kind of vision has now we're farming vineyard on Mount Veeder, one in Coombsville, where we're doing it all from the 17 Black Angus cows that roam the vineyards during the winter to all dry farmed and all organic and non-hedged and no-till, this Fukuoka method of farming that, came over for this Japanese rice farmer about wild forestry integration. And it's really migrated into something that was, I think, even more complete than we had originally envisioned back in 11 years ago. So it's something. So to find it, it's pilcrow-wine.com. And there's a button to sign up to request an allocation. We're very fortunate that it's selling out now, but we're always adding as we're growing new people. And so it's a way to stay connected to that if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're currently making 3 vineyard designate Cabernets, and we're tiny, tiny, tiny. We're one of the most micro producers in the Napa Valley. So it's really just Jonah and I working with each farmer and grower. We're bringing in 3 to 4 tons of Cabernet from each vineyard. So we're making like 8 barrels of each wine. So we're just as small as can be, but we also really like working with partners like Wine Access. And we really like the idea that we're telling kind of a fresh take on a very, very old story of the Napa Valley.
Yeah.
Me too. And remind everyone what glass they should be drinking it out of.
And first of all, if you, at the break, before you open your Pelaverga, you should have gone to mygabrielglass1s.com and picked up your very own Gabriel Glass stems. There's only going to be 2 to choose from. The gold edition, which is completely handmade and mouth blown. It takes 2 artisans about 15 minutes to make each stem. So this is as truly handmade as it gets. And then there is the standard glass, which is a real innovation of not machine made, but machine blown. And that glass is just a little bit thicker of a stem, but not very noticeable. But it's one piece, completely seamless. No joints, no glues, no seams. It's a real artisanal piece as well. So choose your poison. It will not affect how the wine tastes, but it'll affect how you feel when you're drinking the wine. So if like that handmade, small crafted item's important, get the gold edition. If you're looking for more of a value, grab the standard. Each is going to do the same thing for the wine.
I disagree. I think it definitely changes how the wine tastes, but we'll save that for another podcast.
All right. Next time.
Jonah and Sara, thank you so much for joining me. You can find this wine and other wines at wineaccess.com. And of course, if you want to be clued into wines like this that we are finding on your behalf and just get them shipped to your door, you can join the Wine Access Unfiltered Podcast Wine Club by looking at the description below, clicking the link, and signing yourself up. We've got a beautiful new shipment on the way coming soon. Until then, we'll see you guys next time. Grab your wine glass, give us a cheers, and have a great rest of your summer, guys.
Thanks, Amanda.
Cheers.